Before we get started, there will be potential spoilers in the video to come. Ladies and gentlemen, how's it going? In today's video, we're going to be ranking every anime that I've ever seen. This will be an ongoing series where at the end of the year, I'll do an update video recapping all the series I've seen throughout the year. If you have any series recommendations, leave them in the comments section below. And while you're down there, consider leaving a like and possibly subscribing. Without further ado, let's get into it. First up, we got Attack on Titan. Now, this series is just amazing. I don't even need to explain to you why this series is great. If you've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's amazing moments like Levi versus the Beast Titan, Erwin's incredible speech. There are so many moments from this show that are just fantastic. I haven't seen the final season, so I can't really touch upon the ending too much, but I've heard so many times that this series is incredible. That season ends fantastically, and I cannot wait to watch it. Next up, we have Bleach. This is my favorite series of all time. The aesthetics, the power system, the soundtrack, the characters. I can go on and on about how great this series is. It is by far one of my favorites of all time. The 1,000-Year Blood War arc that's airing right now is so good. You have to watch Bleach. If you're not caught up with it, I recommend it. Next is Blue Exorcist. This story is pretty decent. I really like the premise of the main character being the son of the devil and going to an academy to basically learn how to control his powers to eventually kill Satan. And I would say overall it's pretty good. I've watched up to the Kyoto saga, so I haven't seen the newest season, but what I've watched so far, it's decent. It's not bad. I would say it's perfectly meh. Next up, we have Chainsaw Man. Within the 12 episodes that are out right now, this series has me hooked. I cannot wait for season 2 and the seasons to come, but so far it is incredible. There's so many cool moments in this story, like Denji diving into the creepy hotel that they're in with that demon that trapped him in there, and him just ripping that thing apart. It is so cool. I highly recommend Chainsaw Man. Next, we have Code Geass. Now, this story is just fantastic. I don't remember a lot of the minute details of this story, but what I do remember is how good of a main character Lelouch is. There is just so many points in this story that I love, especially the ending. The ending is great. I highly recommend Code Geass. Next on the list, we have Death Note. This is the story I recommend anyone who has never watched anime. It is an easy story to get into. The characters are fantastic. Light and L's dynamic is so good. The soundtrack of this story is also great. I love the soundtrack to Death Note. Also, the ending to this series is so poetic. I love the ending to this. I know a lot of people say once L dies, it gets worse. I loved this series all the way through. It is fantastic. If you haven't seen it, what are you doing? This show is so good. Just watch Death Note. Next up, we have Dragon Ball Z. This series is just iconic. There's so many great moments, like Goku going Super Saiyan for the first time, Gohan's father and son Kamehameha combo against Cell, Goku's Spirit Bomb against Kid Buu. I even like the aesthetics of Super Saiyan 4 Goku and Vegeta, and especially their fusions. The fusions are some of the coolest characters within the show. I can't say enough how much I love Dragon Ball Z. It also holds sentimental value to me because back in 5th grade, this was what I bonded with my best friend over back in art class. Like, this show just is incredible, and it's so iconic. A lot of the animes today wouldn't be around if it wasn't for Dragon Ball Z's work. Next, we have Erased. Erased is pretty decent. It's like a murder mystery where essentially the main character is like a failing manga artist, and he goes back in time to like prevent deaths from the people that are around him. It's not bad, but a particular series does the time travel thing a little bit better in my opinion, which is Steins Gate, and I might as well talk about it now. The character dynamics within Steins Gate is phenomenal. I love the main character, Hyoin Kiyoma, and his connection slash relationship slash friendship with Makise Kurisu. This story is one of those where, like, you have to kind of watch him multiple times to fully understand things. There's so much foreshadowing within this series that, like, even if you catch it, or if you, like, pay attention to a lot of things, you'll still miss a lot of stuff. Even watching it multiple times, you'll, like, slowly see things that you didn't notice in previous watches. It's so good. The ending is fantastic. Next up, we have Fairy Tail. Now, this series also is pretty decent. I really liked the Tenru Island arc and the Grand Magic Games arc within this story. I also really like a lot of the characters' designs, like Urza, Zareth, Agnologia. There's a lot of great character designs within this story. The only reason I would say it's meh, personally, in my opinion, it doesn't really hold up to anything above it, but it's not bad that I wouldn't recommend it or watch it again. It's just decent. It also is a pretty long-running one. If I were to recommend a long-running anime, I would just recommend stuff within my top 10 already. Next up, we have Fire Force. This is one of the series that I think the aesthetics are amazing in this show. I love the way every character is drawn, and the way they look, the way their powers are animated. It is such a cool story. The only thing is we don't have confirmation if there's going to be a next season, but everything else, seasons 1 and 2, were just fantastic. I love this series. And it's written by the same person who does Soul Eater, which I might as well talk about Soul Eater now. Soul Eater also is a phenomenal series. Part of it's a little bit nostalgia for me because, like, this was kind of like the first anime I watched that made me want to watch more anime. Like, I woke up one night and this was just playing on Toonami and I was hooked. It was the fight between Stein and Medusa, and that immediately captivated me. I wanted to keep watching. The only thing about this series that, like, I dislike is the ending. The ending is so disappointing. If you've seen this show, you know exactly how dumb this ending is. One word just, like, defeats the last enemy. It's so dumb. I wish they had a better ending, because if so, this series probably would have been in top 10. Next up, we got Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Now, this series is just amazing all the way through. The characters are fantastic. Edward, Alphonse, Winry, Roy Mustang, even King Bradley. All of the characters within this story are so well written. And even the overall story and themes are just incredible. Like, this series is literally at the top of my anime list for a reason. It's just so good. I highly recommend Full Metal Alchemist if you have not seen it. Next, we have Hellsing. The aesthetics to this show are so cool. Alucard is such a badass main character. And he's so bustedly overpowered. Like, his abilities are just insane. The way every fight scene is like animated is just so cool. It's such a great show. Next, we have Hunter x Hunter. This is easily one of my favorite series of all time. It has fantastic arcs, like the York New City arc, the Chimera Ant arc. A lot of the villains that are in this story are just so good. Crollo, Hisoka, Merriwen. They're all fantastic. I hope we get a continuation of the anime because I've heard that the manga gets even better. This series also got my fiance to finally watch anime. She didn't really like it up until she saw the ending of the Chimera Ant arc when I was watching it. And she went back and watched the entire series, and now she is basically an anime fan. So this series has to go in top 10. It's so good. Next up, we have Jujutsu Kaisen. Now, this show is just so good. There are amazing characters within this story, like Gojo, Geto, Toji, Sukuna, Megumi. There's just so many amazing fights throughout this story as well. The entire Shibuya incident arc is just filled with god tier fights. It's like one of my favorite war arcs in all of anime. Also, the beginning 4 episodes of season 2 are just gorgeous. I'm a sucker for best friend stories, and season 2's Hidden Arsenal does this better than almost any anime I've ever seen. It's easily a top 10. JJK is such a great series. It also has a gorgeous soundtrack, amazing openings. I could literally talk about this series all day. Next up, we have JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. When I first started this series, I'm not gonna lie, I thought part 1 was kind of boring, but after giving it a couple of tries and getting past part 1, I am so glad I kept watching this show. It is so goofy, and there's so much bullshit that happens within this show. You never even know what to expect in every episode. I just finished part 4 a couple days ago, and I'm going on to part 5, and I cannot wait to continue watching this series. It's just so goofy, and there's so much shenanigans that happens. Great characters, great villains. This show is just so good. Next up, we have Naruto. This series is just so iconic. There's so many great characters like the entire Uchiha family, Kakashi, Naruto. This series was literally like my childhood growing up. I loved every single thing about this series. There's so many great fight scenes like Naruto versus Sasuke round 1 and round 2, Sasuke versus Itachi, Pain versus the entire Leaf Village, and even Madara being the true hero of this story, trying to fight off the entire main cast just to prevent the birth of Boruto. This series is just so good. You gotta watch Naruto. You literally could just use a filler guide to skip past all the filler. All the canon material is just perfection. Next up, we have One Piece. This is easily one of my favorites of all time. This series is so good. The storytelling, the foreshadowing. There's points where Oda name drops a character in episode 2, which is Jinbei. He doesn't even show up until the 500s. Stuff like that is just so good. The way certain plot points will be mentioned early on and it will become relevant again after hundreds of episodes is just amazing. Not to mention, as I've been saying throughout all of my top 10s, the soundtrack. The soundtrack to this show is so good. There's also amazing story arcs within this series, like the Enies Lobby and Water 7 arc, the emotional War of Marineford, And even Wano, even though it's like a massive arc, that's one massive arc of great storytelling, especially because the payoff of Luffy getting his Gear 5th power, which is like easily one of the best transformations in all of anime, it's fantastic. I can go on and on about how great this series is. Next up, we have Parasite. Now, this story's premise is pretty cool. It's basically about these like parasitic creatures that crawl into people's ears, taking over their brain and making them become these like crazy like monsters. And the main character Shinichi basically one day has like an earbud in, so the parasite that tries to take over him can't get to his brain, so it kind of like goes into his hand and essentially turns Shinichi slowly into this like more evil version of himself, and he becomes less emotional. He starts finding himself doing irrational things. Like there's a scene where he finds a dead dog on the side of the road, and once it dies, he just throws it in the trash. And then his love interest basically shows up and confronts him about it, basically being like, hey, you've changed. You become more evil. Like, I liked you for who you are before this parasite. Wait a minute, is this just the plot of Spider-Man? Next up, we have Promise Neverland. Now, the only reason I'm putting this in such a low tier is because of the fact that I've seen videos about how awful Season 2 is. Season 1 was pretty decent. Like, without Season 2, it'd probably go right here. But because of the fact that I heard they absolutely butchered Season 2, kind of makes me not want to continue this series again, which is kind of a shame because Season 1 wasn't that bad. It was actually a pretty cool story and premise. But it's unfortunate what they did with Season 2. So maybe I have to read the manga to like fully appreciate this series. But for now, I probably won't watch this series again. Next up, we have ReZero. Now, typically, I'm not a fan of isekai animes. Something about them I just haven't really liked all that much. But this one in particular, I do really enjoy. I like the way the characters are drawn in this series. I also really like the premise of Subaru just having to reset every time he dies and relive the same day with changing like subtle things to make him progress. I've only seen Season 1, and I haven't really caught up with Seasons 2 or 3, but Season 1 was really good. I really want to like finish the other seasons, but for now, it's gonna just stay in this tier. Next up, we have Samurai Champloo. Now, the way I first heard about this anime was my friend recommending it to me over Discord. Now, we had heard about it through Logic's song Man I Is. At the end, there's like this little sound bit where basically it talks about Samurai Champloo, Trigun, and Cowboy Bebop being in constant rotation in the making of that album. And I kid you not, that was literally the reason he wanted to watch it. And I'm glad I watched it too. It is such a chill, late night watch. There's also a particular episode, I think it's like episode 9, that is just absolutely hilarious. You gotta watch that episode. It is absolutely wacky. I remember just laughing and having fun watching that episode, as well as just enjoying this entire series. Next up, we have 7 Deadly Sins. Now, this series is pretty good. It is like the quintessential fantasy story. It's almost like a D&D campaign brought to life. I love the fact that all of the main sins have like interwoven backstories. I love the entire characters' dynamic with each other. I know a lot of people hate on this show, but I genuinely enjoyed it. I also like the openings to each of the seasons. I feel like if you give this series a shot, you may like it. Also, Meliodas is just the GOAT. Next, we have Solo Leveling. Now, Solo Leveling only has 12 episodes currently, but I've seen that at Jump Festa 2024, they are rumored to announce when Season 2 comes out, and I cannot wait. Within the 12 episodes that are out currently, I was immediately hooked. From the moment of Sung-woo encountering the statue in the first few episodes, to him fighting that, like, Shadow Knight that he, like, takes control of and is able to summon, there are so many amazing moments from this show that I cannot wait to see where this story goes in the next season. Next, we have Spy X Family. Now, this series is fantastic. This is one of the series that I recommend non-anime watchers to check out, because it's a very simple story. It has a lot of comedic moments within it, and overall, I love the concept of how Lloyd, Yoru, and Anya all have, like, their own particular, like, secret that they can't tell one another. And it creates a ton of goofy and incredibly wholesome moments. I absolutely love this series. This is one of the series that I watched with my fiance, and we both had a blast watching it. I highly recommend Spy X Family to anybody. Next up, we have SAO. Now, I loved the first 15 episodes of this show. The first half of this show was fantastic. If they would have just kept going with the premise they had from the first part, it would have been great. But then they get to, like, that elf story arc. I don't even remember the name of it, but God, it was so disappointing. I don't think I'll ever, like, go back and rewatch this show. I even watched Season 2, which is Gungale Online, and I just couldn't finish it. Like, I was so disappointed in this series. It was so promising when it first came out, but honestly, to me, it doesn't hold up, so I don't know if I'll ever watch this show again. Next up, we have Tokyo Ghoul. Now, this series was fantastic. When I watched it, it was back in high school, so I don't remember a lot of stuff that happens, especially in, like, Season 2. I've never seen Season 3, but I want to talk about Season 1. The ending episode of Season 1 between Kaneki and Jason was phenomenal. I loved that fight, especially because one of the best openings in anime history is just playing over the entire fight. You watch Kaneki get tortured over and over again to finally he hits, like, this breaking point, and that fight starts, the soundtrack loads up. It is amazing. Now, maybe I have to go back and watch Season 2 again and watch Season 3. I heard that Season 2 doesn't really follow the manga all that often. Like I said, I don't really remember Season 2 all that much, but I definitely loved Season 1. It was fantastic. And to round out my top 10, I have Vinland Saga. This series was recommended to me by a coworker, and I am so glad he gave me this recommendation. This series was fantastic. I remember watching each episode, going into work that day, and just yapping about this series to him nonstop and how phenomenal it was. I love Thorfinn's story of watching his father die in front of him, to his, like, revenge arc that he goes through all through Season 1, and then him getting, like, essentially put on a farm and put into slavery. It is just a phenomenal story. I don't want to spoil the minor details, but you have to watch Vinland Saga to understand. Like, it is a amazing series. I cannot recommend this series enough. And finally, we have Yu Yu Hakusho. Now, this was the series that Togashi first made before he made Hunter x Hunter. And it is great. I love Yusuke as a protagonist, as well as the main cast, Kuwabara, Hiei, Kurama. They're all such great characters. This series also has one of my favorite tournament arcs in all of anime. The Dark Tournament is fantastic. You could tell by the end of the series, Togashi did kind of rush this because he was gonna make Hunter x Hunter, but that doesn't fault it as a series. This series is still fantastic. I highly recommend it. And that's the list. If you have any recommendations, leave them in the comments below. And while you're down there, let me know what your favorite anime series is. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And now, cue that end screen.
Yeah, put me in a box. I be on my OGs, busting all blocks. I be going OT, got me going hard. You don't even know me, don't know who you are. What you gonna do? Posted with my rap friends, teach you how to boom.